During the 8 and 16-bit eras, Disney games thrived on Sega hardware, and while many will hold up Aladdin as the benchmark for Disney excellence of the era, it was Sega's own Disney games that frequently delivered, particularly those that starred Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. Donald first hit Sega screens in the critically acclaimed Quack shot on the Mega Drive or Genesis, while debuting on the Master System and Game Gear with Lucky Dime Caper that same year. Sequels would follow on all three systems with similar commercial success. That is, until the Saturn landed, and then there was nothing. Nothing, that is, aside from the Japan-only I Love Mickey Mouse compilation of Quackshot and Castle of Illusion. Now, as a kid, I loved those Mickey and Donald games, which is why when the Dreamcast magazine Dream On Volume 17 demo disc actually featured a demo of Quack Attack, I was excited. The question is, did it stand up to those Sega classics, or did this Ubisoft produced entry not fit the bill? As I mentioned, I first played this via the Dream On demo disc in 2001, and immediately I was pretty impressed. The demo spans the very first stage and acts as a tutorial of sorts, while also featuring the opening cinematic in its entirety. What I found was a game that was bright, cheerful and fun to play, and at the time, it felt like something very much in the vein of those Mega Drive, Master System and Game Gear titles. A straightforward, colourful Disney platform game featuring everybody's favourite Madcap Mallard. Sadly, it wasn't long after that the Dreamcast itself was discontinued. And as I did my best to catch up on the vast array of classic games on the system, sadly, Quack Attack just kind of fell by the wayside. But finally, I managed to pick it up and play through it all recently, just over 20 years later. So this adds yet another layer to the question. Does it match those 90s Sega classics, and how does it hold up 2 decades later? The basics first. Quack Attack, or Goin Quackers, is a platform game, again, like those Sega classics of old. This means going through a series of stages, jumping over pits, bopping off enemies, and dispatching a boss at the end. The game really doesn't stray too far from this template, and much like Mario's coins and Sonic's rings, Donald collects stars, and collecting 100 of those gives you an extra life. You can also pick up these ice cream power-ups, which give Donald a period of invincibility, so far, so by the numbers. Your main objective is to collect the various keys to the boss portal. Collecting all 4, and you face off against the area's guardian who, once defeated, gives you a spot to place Gyro's antenna and let Donald warp to the next stage. The other collectibles in each stage are the toys for Donald's nephews Huey, Dewey and Louie, toys that have been possessed by Murloc's magic and can be freed, albeit momentarily, when attacking the magic book that controls them. Collecting all 3 toys in all 4 stages gives you access to a chase scene, whereby you run towards the screen, pursued by some huge enemy or obstacle. Think of Sonic Adventure's Orca Whale Chase, and you get the idea. Even closer, Sonic Adventure 2's City Escapes is particularly apt, given that one chase stage sees Donald chased by a giant truck. Beat those and you get a chance to challenge Gladstone's times by speedrunning all the previous stages. None of that is actually needed to beat the game, but they serve as nice little side quests and provide some cool outfits as a result. One of them actually looks like it harkens back to not only Indiana Jones, but to Quackshot too. The rest of the game is straightforward. 4 worlds, each with 4 stages, alternating between 3D and 2D platforming, and 4 bosses. Beat them, you beat the game. This is held together by the story, and while Gladstone and Gyro may be fringe Donald Duck characters, Daisy and Donald's nephews Huey, Dewey and Louie should be relatively well known to anyone who watched the show DuckTales. In a story beat that mirrors Sega's Castle of Illusion, Daisy is kidnapped by the wizard Murloc. Gladstone, playing the role of Donald's rival in this game, tries to give chase by using the transporter's power, necessitating Gyro, who is effectively Donald's man in the chair in this game, to urge us to move through the areas, planting his antennas. Again, it's fairly standard stuff. Presentation wise though, this is a decent looking and sounding game. Music is suitable and has a real charm to it with some catchy themes. Sound is great too, with a load of dialogue and sound bites from all the Disney cast of the time. And this is tied in with a nice little CGI intro and ending. When I first played this back in the year 2001, I thought it looked amazing. Going back now, there's stuff that's good, and there's stuff that's not bad, but it's just not so impressive. You see, Quack Attack started life as a PlayStation and Nintendo 64 game. Now both of those versions are quite different from one another, but the Dreamcast version is based off the N64 port. What this means is that in terms of assets, this is basically an up-res N64 game. By no means is this game really pushing the Dreamcast in what it can do, and some of the animations really do portray its origins, especially in the dialogue scenes. On the plus side, the game never drops a frame and runs extremely smoothly. Also, the cartoonish visual style, they have a dash of cel shading in there, and the whole look of the game actually holds up really well, much better than you might expect. This is a stark contrast to the PS2 and GameCube versions, which for the most part are very different again, and have far darker graphical looks. It will come as no surprise to learn that this game actually uses the very same engine as Rayman 2, and that classic title also saw ports to all major platforms of the time and was also published by Ubisoft. And just like that game on the Dreamcast, this one still looks great today, provided that you excuse the close-up animations. The rock solid frame rate helps the gameplay a lot because it feels fluid and responsive throughout the whole game. During my playthrough of the game, not once did I feel like any of the jumps or attacks were delayed, or didn't come out when I needed them to. And while that smooth frame rate may come from the fact that the Dreamcast is basically cruising when running this game, it's certainly no bad thing. Some very generous hitboxes also help the game along. The game never seems unfair in how you deal with your enemies, and only some frustrations with depth perception when timing jumps gave any headaches at all when trying to beat Gyro's time trials. And that leads us to the biggest critique of the game. It's way too easy. Even if the odd jump costs you a life or two, you rack up so many 1-ups throughout the game that I don't think my counter dipped below double digits. The boss keys are pretty easy to find, as are the nephew's toys, and the game can be crushed in less than 2 hours, and 100%ed in about 3. So where does that leave Goin Quackers or Quack Attack? Well, it's a bright, colourful and enjoyable Disney romp, where the music, sound and voice acting really give it an air of authenticity to the source material. The visuals may not be the best you'll see on the Dreamcast, but they're good enough with a style that's aged gracefully. And it helps that this Dreamcast version is arguably the best way to play the game. With versions of Quack Attack on a multitude of platforms all the way up to the PS4, that's a huge achievement. But the stage and visual design feels best and most consistent on the Sega Dreamcast. Later versions remix levels and added moves, but here, Donna's moveset is simple and straightforward. Which brings us full circle, because those simple controls were a staple of classic Sega Disney games. Games that anyone could pick up and play and enjoy. And yes, Quack Attack may be very much on the easy side, but then again, so were many of those games. Donald Duck Quack Attack, or Goin Quackers, on the Sega Dreamcast really does evoke that feeling of Disney on the Master System, Game Gear and Mega Drive. It may not be as iconic or well remembered as World of Illusion or Quackshot, but it delivers an experience that captures the simple joy of 90s Disney, successfully making those who welcome it into their console feel like kids again. In a post-PlayStation era, where games wanted to be edgy and epic and increasingly complex, where licensed titles frequently became an afterthought, the demo that I played at the time felt like a beautiful callback to a forgotten childhood, and going back to it now, I'm happy to report that it holds up wonderfully. So in the end, Quack Attack is a game firmly rooted in video gaming's past, not just because it's a 23-year-old Dreamcast game, but because it's a game that harkens back to a period of gaming a decade prior. A game that had a retro feel to it, even back then. A game that exudes the simple joy of play. It may be a kids game first and foremost, but it also feels like a game for us adults, those of us who want to relive those bygone days. And really, as retro gamers, isn't that just what we're all doing? This has been Dan the Mega Driver of the Sega Guys, and until next time, we will see you on the Sega side.